Trust in God. He may delay, but he never fails. This truth has carried generations through storms that felt endless, nights that felt unbearable, and seasons that seemed silent. Trusting God does not mean life becomes easy. It means life becomes meaningful, even when it is hard. Many people misunderstand delay as denial, silence as abandonment, and waiting as punishment. But in the spiritual realm, delay is often preparation, silence is instruction, and waiting is transformation. God's timing is not governed by human urgency, but by divine wisdom. What feels late to us is often perfectly aligned in eternity. When God delays, He is not ignoring your prayers. He is shaping the outcome in ways you cannot yet see. Just as a seed must remain hidden in the soil before it breaks through the surface, many blessings require darkness, pressure, and time before they are revealed. If God answered every prayer instantly, we would never develop faith, patience, or depth of character. Delay stretches your trust so it can hold what is coming next. Throughout history, those who trusted God the most were often those who waited the longest. Abraham waited decades for a promise that seemed impossible. Joseph waited in betrayal, slavery, and prison before stepping into purpose. David waited while being anointed king, yet hunted like a criminal. Jesus himself waited 30 years before beginning his public ministry. None of these delays were accidents. Each waiting season was intentional, refining, and necessary. God never rushes what he values. If he is taking time with your life, it is because your calling carries weight. What God prepares slowly, he sustains powerfully. The delay you are in right now may be protecting you from receiving something before you are ready to steward it. Trusting God in delay is one of the hardest spiritual disciplines because it requires faith without evidence. It asks you to believe when circumstances contradict your prayers. It demands hope when doors remain closed and strength when answers seem distant. Yet this is exactly where faith matures. Faith is not proven when prayers are answered quickly. It is proven when you keep believing, even when nothing changes. God watches how you trust him in the waiting, because waiting reveals the true posture of your heart. Do you trust him only for outcomes, or do you trust him for who he is? When you learn to trust God, even without immediate results, you move from transactional faith to relational faith. God never fails, even when it feels like everything else does. Human systems fail, people fail, plans fail, strength fails, but God remains faithful beyond your emotions, circumstances, and understanding. His faithfulness is not measured by speed, but by fulfillment. When God promises something, he does not abandon it midway. He does not forget. He does not miscalculate. He does not change his mind due to difficulty. If God said it, he will complete it, just not always in the way or timeline you expect. What feels like failure is often God working behind the scenes, aligning details you could never orchestrate yourself. Many people lose faith in the delay because they focus on what they don't see rather than what God is doing invisibly. While you wait, God is rearranging hearts, shifting environments, removing obstacles, and building strength within you. Some blessings cannot arrive until certain people leave your life. Some prayers cannot be answered until your character catches up with your request. Some doors remain closed because opening them too early would harm you. God sees the full picture. You only see the present moment. Trust bridges that gap. Delay also teaches surrender. It teaches you that you are not in control, and that is not a weakness, it is freedom. When you release control, you release anxiety. When you trust God's timing, you stop forcing outcomes that drain your spirit. Many failures happen not because God failed, but because people moved ahead of God. They rushed relationships, careers, decisions, and callings before divine alignment was complete. God's delay is often His mercy. He delays to protect you from pain you cannot yet discern. Even when prayers seem unanswered, God is still working for your good. Sometimes the answer is not yet. Sometimes the answer is wait. Sometimes the answer is no, because God has something better. Trusting God means believing that His no is just as loving as His yes. It means trusting that He sees beyond temporary desires and is committed to eternal purpose. God does not withhold blessings out of cruelty. He withholds them out of wisdom. If He delays something, it is because the right time has not yet arrived, and when it does, nothing will be able to stop it. When God finally moves, His movement is precise, complete, and undeniable. What He does in a moment can outweigh years of waiting. One divine shift can restore what was lost, redeem what was broken, and fulfill what seemed forgotten. God does not arrive late. He arrives right on time. His timing often shocks us because it comes when hope is nearly exhausted. That is when faith is most visible. God specializes in arriving at moments where only He can receive the glory. Trusting God does not mean you will never question. It means you choose belief over doubt. It means you keep praying even when answers delay. It means you keep walking even when the road feels long. It means you keep praising even when circumstances do not change. Trust is not passive, it is active endurance. Every day you continue trusting God in delay, your spiritual strength increases. You may not feel it, but you are becoming unshakable. God never fails because His nature is faithfulness. He cannot contradict Himself. He cannot abandon His children. He cannot break His promises. Heaven does not operate on human clocks, but it operates on perfect justice and divine order. What God has spoken over your life will not return empty. It will come to pass in the right season. Your job is not to figure out the timing. It is to remain faithful while waiting. So if you are in a season where prayers feel delayed, remember this. Delay does not mean defeat. Silence does not mean absence. Waiting does not mean abandonment. God is still with you, still working, still faithful. Trust Him when it is hard. Trust Him when it hurts. Trust Him when you don't understand. Because when God finally reveals what He was doing during the delay, you will realize He never failed. He was preparing something far greater than you imagined. Second, when you truly trust God, you begin to understand that delay is not wasted time. Nothing in God's economy is accidental. Every tear you cry in the waiting waters the ground of future testimony. Every unanswered prayer strengthens your inner foundation. Every moment of uncertainty builds a dependence on God that success alone could never create. Many people want God's promise, but few are willing to endure God's process. Yet the process is what prepares you to survive the promise. Without the delay, the blessing could crush you instead of elevate you. God delays because He sees what you cannot see. You may be asking for relief, but God is working on roots. You may be asking for doors to open, but God is refining your discernment. You may be praying for change around you, while God is transforming something within you. Trusting God means believing that inner transformation is just as important as external breakthrough. A rushed blessing often leads to regret, but a delayed blessing leads to peace. There are seasons where God allows you to walk through uncertainty so that you learn how to hear His voice without distractions. When everything is quiet, when help does not arrive quickly, when people fall away, you begin to recognize that God alone is enough. Delay strips you of false support systems and reveals the one who never leaves. In that sacred space of waiting, God builds intimacy. He teaches you how to lean on Him rather than outcomes. This is why many people encounter God most deeply, not during miracles, but during waiting. God's delays also separate surface faith from rooted faith. Anyone can praise when prayers are answered instantly. Anyone can believe when life is smooth. But it takes mature faith to worship while waiting, to obey while uncertain, and to trust while hurting. God is not impressed by loud faith. He is moved by loyal faith. Faith that stays, faith that endures, faith that does not walk away when answers are slow. This kind of faith attracts heaven's attention. Sometimes God delays because the blessing involves others. He is aligning people, preparing hearts, healing wounds, and positioning circumstances. What you are waiting for may not be about you alone. God sees generations, not just moments. He sees consequences you cannot imagine. He sees timing that will cause maximum impact and minimum damage. Trusting God means accepting that His plan is bigger than your urgency. Many people quit too early. They give up in the final stretch, unaware that breakthrough was closer than ever. Delay tests perseverance. It reveals whether your faith is temporary or anchored. God often allows the delay to reach its peak right before release, because that is when your dependence on Him is strongest. When the blessing finally arrives, you will know without doubt that it was God. No shortcuts, no manipulation, no human credit. Even when delay feels painful, God remains gentle with your heart. He understands your frustration. He sees your tears. He hears prayers you no longer have words to pray. Silence from God is not neglect. It is often trust. God trusts that what He has planted in you will sustain you while He works behind the scenes. Heaven is never idle, even when earth feels still. God never fails because failure is not in His nature. What fails is human expectation, limited vision, and impatience. God's faithfulness does not depend on your consistency. His faithfulness flows from His character. Even when your faith wavers, God remains steady. Even when you doubt, God remains committed. Even when you are tired, God continues working. One day, you will look back at the delay and thank God for every unanswered prayer, every closed door, every waiting season. You will see how God protected you from what you thought you needed and prepared you for what you truly required. What once felt like rejection will reveal itself as redirection. What once felt like loss will become wisdom. What once felt like delay will become divine precision. So hold on. Do not rush God. Do not compare your timeline to others. Do not interpret silence as failure. Trust the process. Trust the timing. Trust the God who has never lost a battle and never broken a promise. Because he may delay, but he never fails. In the deepest moments of waiting, God often invites you into a level of trust you have never known before. This is where faith becomes personal, not borrowed from sermons, scriptures, or the testimonies of others, but forged through your own experience. When the delay stretches longer than expected, God is teaching you how to stand without leaning on visible proof. This kind of faith cannot be shaken because it is rooted in relationship, not results. You stop asking, "When will it happen?" and begin asking, "Who am I becoming while I wait?" That shift alone marks spiritual maturity. Waiting exposes hidden fears and unresolved wounds. God allows delay not to torment you, but to heal you. Many prayers go unanswered because God is first answering a deeper prayer you didn't even know you had. The prayer for wholeness. You may ask for success, but God sees insecurity that needs healing. You may ask for love, but God sees attachment wounds that need restoration. You may ask for elevation, but God sees pride or fear that must be refined. Delay gives God access to areas of your heart that instant answers would bypass. There are moments when trusting God feels like standing at the edge of a cliff with no visible bridge. Yet faith steps forward anyway, believing that God's hand will meet you mid-air. This is not blind faith, it is surrendered faith. It is the understanding that even if the outcome is different from your expectation, God's plan remains perfect. True trust says, even if I don't understand, I will not turn back. Heaven responds powerfully to this level of surrender. God's delays also teach discernment. In waiting, you learn the difference between God's voice and your own desires. You learn patience, not as passivity, but as disciplined hope. You learn how to sit with uncertainty without letting it poison your spirit. The waiting season sharpens your spiritual senses. You begin to notice subtle guidance, divine nudges, and inner peace that directs you more accurately than rushed decisions ever could. Sometimes God delays because He is protecting you from settling for less than His best. What you desire may be good, but God is preparing something greater. If He gave you the lesser too soon, you might cling to it and miss the higher calling. Delay clears the path for excellence. It keeps you from compromising your purpose for temporary comfort. Trusting God means believing that His later is better than your now. In seasons of delay, loneliness often increases. People may not understand why you are still waiting. They may question your faith, your choices, or your direction. This isolation is painful, but it is also sacred. God often separates before He elevates. He draws you into quiet spaces so He can speak clearly. When the noise fades, His voice becomes unmistakable. What feels like abandonment is often divine invitation. God never wastes suffering. Every delay carries hidden instruction. Every unanswered prayer carries wisdom. Every closed door redirects your steps toward a destination you could not have planned. Trusting God does not mean denying pain. It means believing that pain has purpose. God is close to the brokenhearted, especially in seasons where waiting weighs heavily on the soul. When God finally releases what you have been waiting for, it will come with clarity, peace, and confirmation. You will not need to chase it, force it, or defend it. What is from God arrives without confusion. It fits, It aligns. It sustains. And in that moment, the waiting will make sense. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. You will realize that God was not delaying to test your patience, but to deepen your trust. He was not withholding to frustrate you, but to prepare you. He was not silent because he was absent, but because he was working beyond what you could perceive. God's faithfulness becomes most visible in hindsight. So if today you find yourself still waiting, still believing, still hoping despite exhaustion, know this: your faith is not in vain. Heaven has not forgotten you. God has not failed you. The delay you are experiencing is not the end of the story. It is the refining chapter before fulfillment. Stand firm. Stay faithful. Keep trusting. Because when God moves, he moves completely. When God answers, he answers fully. And when God promises, he never fails.